Welcome, my friends, to the Intentional Wisdom Podcast. I'm your host, Greg Campion, and I'm delighted to bring you this conversation today with Louie Ruvolo. Louie is one of the most inspiring people that I've come across. As you'll hear in this conversation, Louie has struggled deeply in his life with addiction, in his case, alcohol addiction. And while many of the stories of alcoholics don't end positively for obvious reasons, Louie's thankfully does. Today, at 58 years old, he's not only conquered his alcohol addiction, but he has channeled some of those tendencies into something very positive, endurance sports. In fact, seemingly by the day, he is pulling off more and more amazing feats, including recently becoming an Ironman Triathlete and completing a 100-mile ultra marathon. Very impressive stuff. I came away from this conversation feeling inspired, and I hope you will too. Before we get into my conversation with Louie, just a quick reminder to subscribe to the Intentional Wisdom newsletter. You can find that at gregcampion.substack.com. It's one email every other week with the best of what I'm learning from people just like Louie. It includes behind the scenes stories from the podcast, tips, tricks, strategies, technologies, everything that I'm using myself to optimize my own habits and routines, and a reader favorite, my content diet. So what I'm reading, watching, and listening to, I share all of that. gregcampion.substack.com. Check it out and let me know what you think. Finally, if you love this episode as much as I hope you will, please share it on social media. Tell a friend, help spread the word. It really does help, and I will be eternally grateful. All right, enough intro. Here is Louie Ruvolo. All right, Louie Ruvolo, welcome to the Intentional Wisdom Podcast.
Hey, thank you, Greg. I appreciate you having me on, man.
I'm so psyched to have you. As I was telling you before we hit record, I've been following you for a while now on Twitter, and I just love all the content you're putting out. Super inspirational stuff. You're a little further along in the journey than I am. I think you're a little more than 10 years older than me, something like that. And you know, you make your current age look good. And so I have to give you a compliment on that. But I guess for anyone who doesn't know you, you share a lot on Twitter you're very open about your past struggles with alcohol and your journey to sort of overcome that. And then now today, it seems like every time I open up Twitter and look at it, you know, Louie's breaking some kind of record or doing some kind of crazy Ultraman race or 100-miler or something like that. So you're doing a lot of cool stuff, man. And I want to talk about all of it, but just, you know, first of all, thank you again for coming on.
Great. Yeah, great. Thanks. You know, I was just thinking that I think there came a time in my sobriety that I was just willing to put it all out there. In the beginning, when I was newly sober, I was intimidated about talking and sharing because I needed a job, and I didn't want to be judged on my past. So in the beginning, I was very intimidated by that, but kind of reached a milestone in my sobriety where I feel like my story can help others, and that's really why I'm willing to put it out there. So anyway, appreciate you helping me spread that word.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you are willing to talk about it, and I totally agree. I think that's it's got the potential to help so many people, and I'm sure you already have helped a lot of people. But maybe let's start there. I mean, I want to talk about everything I mentioned up front and even get into stuff like your habits and your routines today and all that kind of stuff. But let's start first by looking back and maybe talking a little bit about, what you have overcome. So I was really struck. You put something out on Twitter recently that said, at 37, I was having beer and bourbon for breakfast. And I thought, wow, that really paints quite a vivid picture. So maybe if you wouldn't mind, I'd love for you to take us back there to start and tell us kind of what was going on in your life at that time.
Yeah, sure. So my the beginning of that tweet was I became a daily drinker at the age of 17. And so what happened was I graduated high school, and that summer after my graduation, I moved to the beach with two of my friends, and that's really when my drinking became established as a daily use. So I struggled from that young age for years to kind of control it and to push it back, but it was slowly progressing and getting to the point where just drinking after work was no longer what I was interested in. I was interested in full day of drinking, and which made it very difficult to work, obviously. But by the time I turned 37, I had two really hard years of drinking morning, afternoon, and night, and really it continued to progress to the point where 10 years before my drinking was terrible, and then 5 years before the end it was many times worse, and 2 years and the last 6 months was just in total insanity. So the last 6 months of my drinking, I would either wake up in the morning or come home. I worked third shift, so I was one of two people in a truck that went out all night, and I was at the end of my drinking. I was the passenger, and so I would get out of work at 7 in the morning and stop at the store and grab a bottle of Jack Daniels and a 12-pack of beer, and that was my breakfast in the morning before I went back to bed. So, and it didn't even need to be if I hadn't worked that night, I would wake up the next morning and do the same thing. I would drink the same thing, and for a long period of time, I tried to do it without the booze, just the beer. Limit the amount of beers I was drinking, limit the days that I was drinking, because I knew that the end would come soon if I couldn't control it. The end meaning I would either be forced to stop drinking, I would get so sick that I would have to stop drinking. I would end up in some type of jam that that I would have to stop drinking, or I would end up dead. So I knew that the time was coming that I would have to, that I would not be drinking. So I tried to control it with everything I had, and that didn't work. There was a time towards the end of my drinking when my brother-in-law came to visit me, and another friend, and he was really he came up to do some skiing for a weekend, and he was really frustrated with me about drinking in the morning, and he's like, "Whoa, what is this about? Can't we wait until after we get off the slopes?" I don't even. He didn't even understand, and he was, at one time he was a drinking partner of mine, and it was far beyond what he could have imagined. So, so that was the end of that ride for me, and fortunately, I found some help after that.
So what were I can imagine when you're struggling like that, it's got to be difficult to hold down a job. It's got to be difficult and really trying on your relationships. I mean, what were some of the biggest kind of impacts you were feeling in your life from the drinking?
Yeah, so obviously it's very difficult to hold down a job. I was fortunate enough that my partner in this truck that we drove at night was sober, and he was a friend of mine, and he kind of carried me along for the last 6, 8, 10 months, and did most of the heavy lifting during that period of time. So I was fortunate in that way, but I needed to have I had a commercial driver's license, so I needed to have a medical card that goes along with that driver's license, and I went in for a physical that I couldn't pass. So I don't know if I can still remember what my blood pressure was. I told the nurse that my blood pressure is occasionally high when I go to the doctors, but it was high for other reasons. And one of the reasons that it was high was the appointment was in the morning, and I hadn't had anything to drink overnight, so I was in a state of detox from the alcohol. And she said, "Don't worry if your blood pressure is a little bit high. We'll give you a temporary card if it's high. You can go see your doctor and get that worked out, and you'll still be able to work and keep your license." So she took my blood pressure. It was 210 over 140, and she took back her words about giving me a temporary card at that time because she didn't know if I would have a stroke.
Wow.
I think that's pretty dangerous, having blood pressure that high. So now I'm becoming unemployable. My drinking was taking me to the point where I was no longer going to be employed, and I didn't have a doctor to go see because I avoided doctors. I didn't, they could get in the way of my lifestyle. So I didn't even have that to fall back on. So I was, I was really starting to I was realizing that the game was going to end at some point soon, and being completely unemployable would have just made things worse. So.
And were you married while all this was going on?
No, I was married many years before, and a few years after my daughter was born, I ruined that marriage, and that had a lot to do with my lifestyle, and I take responsibility for it. So, I put them through some difficult times, obviously.
Mm-hmm. And it was were you able to maintain a relationship with your daughter while you were struggling with alcohol?
I struggled. I think I struggled to maintain a relationship. I mean, I've always had a good relationship with my daughter, but when she was 12 years old when I got sober, and before I got sober, I was not a responsible person, so there was no way I could be a responsible dad. And so I did maintain a relationship with her because we have a loving bond, but it was not a responsible one from my side. Once I got sober, that changed.
Well, that's good to hear. So tell me about getting sober. I mean, the picture you paint there is obviously one of a lot of struggle or a lot of pain. I mean, I know that it's really interesting to me to hear that you kind of knew that this was not sustainable. And I don't know if that's like a common thing among alcoholics or not, but it's interesting to me that you kind of realized you were in this thing and this was not going to end well, and you somehow needed to get out of it. Curious if there was like one moment that was a turning point, or how that turning point happened, and how you started on the road to recovery.
Yeah, so there were a few different things that happened right around the same time. So I was afraid that I was not going to be able to maintain my driver's license because I couldn't get that medical card. My living situation and the relationship that I was in with my girlfriend was not going well. They never do when there is that type of, I mean, I don't think they do anyway. I can't imagine they would, but with that type of behavior from me, of course, that was not helpful to our relationship. And another thing was, I remember having a phone call with my mother, and my family was upset with me because, for good reason, because I was, I was an adult, but I was a dependent of theirs. And, every time I got into a jackpot financially or physically, they were the ones that paid the price for that. And my mother was very frustrated. I think other members of my family were frustrated. And I remember having a conversation with Mom, and she started the conversation by saying, "Louie, I love you, but," and I just thought, whoa, there's a but in here. So, she was honest with me about the way she felt. I don't even know if she still remembers that conversation, but I remember parts of it. And, I knew the game was up there too. I knew that I was going to sink or swim, but my problems were not going to be theirs anymore. My mother made that clear. So, yeah, those things came together, and the last piece of the puzzle was the driver of the truck that I was in night after night was sober, and he was a drinking partner of mine. I'd known him for a long time, and I was floored that he could live a life. He and his wife were both sober, and I was floored that they didn't need alcohol anymore, and I knew how they drank, so that gave me a little bit of hope. And we had conversations night after night about recovery, about alcoholism, about 12 steps, 12-step program, about specific steps, about his sober time, about the things in his life that were coming together. He bought a house, and he had a couple dogs now, and he was really starting to get things together, and I admired that about him. So there was a curiosity that I had, and so all of those things, maybe those 4 or 5 things that were happening in my life, converged at the same time, and that was really what opened the door for me.
So what was that kind of first step? I mean, did you go into AA, or did you kind of do it solo, or how does that work? And I'm kind of curious. So congratulations. I understand you celebrated 20 years of sobriety last year. So that's a really great accomplishment coming from where you came from. So kudos to you for that accomplishment, that among your many other accomplishments, but I would imagine that's probably the top one for you. But I guess, how did you do it? How did you do it over the last 20 years? And curious if there was specific programs or practices or protocols that you had to follow to adhere to sobriety.
So when you mention the length of time that I've been sober, my eyes just start welling up with tears.
Yeah.
I mean that what a gift, what a gift. I couldn't even say that as I was coming up to my anniversary, to my 20th anniversary. I couldn't even speak that to people.
Wow. Yeah.
It was so
that powerful,
emotional for me.
Yeah.
So obviously I'm grateful. And just recently I heard that my closest drinking partner passed away. Just recently heard that. And when I got sober, I tried to talk him in. He was like a brother to me. He taught me everything I know about carpentry work and about life, really. But I tried to talk him onto this side, and it didn't happen. And he was probably a couple years older than I am, and just ran out of time because he lived such a hard lifestyle. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that while he was on my mind. Probably the reason that I'm so emotional about my this stretch of sobriety that I've been gifted is because there are so many people that aren't as fortunate as I am. So maybe that's why it brings out such emotion for me. To get back to the question, my friend and his wife, my sober friend that was driving the truck with me, and his wife invited me they were celebrating their 3-year anniversary. and they got sober the same day. And I asked them if I could come to the meeting, to an AA meeting, to 12-step meeting, and just to support them on their anniversary. And it was a good way. I felt safe going into that room. Like nobody's gonna, I'm not going there for me. I'm going for somebody else. But I can still walk through the door and kind of check it out, I guess. And I went to that meeting with them and saw all of the the joy and the life that was in that room, and it didn't look like anything. It didn't look anything like the drudgery that I was living through, and it made an impact on me just from going into that. Just from going to that meeting and watching them celebrate and meeting a couple people. I stood in the background and drank a cup of coffee in the background and talked to a couple people on the sidelines, but I didn't get right into the mix of it. But it did make an impression on me, another impression. And 2 weeks after that, after their anniversary, or a week after, I asked them if they would take me to the meeting. I told them I needed help. And, they knew, they probably knew before I did that I needed help, but, it was coming to an end. So I asked them if they would take me to that meeting, and, we made plans to go, and I didn't show up because I couldn't show up. I couldn't show up couldn't show up for much back then. So, So I never showed up at their house like we had planned, and then we made plans for the next week, for the following week. And my friend's wife is a very good cook, and I'm Italian, so she decided she would put a plate of lasagna into play.
Very smart way to get you to do it.
Brilliant. Yeah, brilliant. So I showed up for the lasagna, and I was sick. I was very sick that day, and I laid on their couch before dinner or after dinner, and I didn't think they were gonna make me go because I was so sick and kind of probably detoxing, and they weren't having it. His wife was just as tough as she was a good cook. So I ended up in the car and got to the meeting, and everybody in that meeting welcomed me, and I didn't know how they knew that I was a newcomer, but back then my skin had a tone of yellow to it, and probably smelled like piss and stale beer. And
so somebody who's been through it couldn't recognize somebody who's going through it. They could
recognize it, exactly.
Yeah.
So I made it to that meeting, and I learned a few things there, and decided that I wouldn't drink the next day, and started putting a couple days together, and I haven't had a drink since that meeting.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really cool. That's a great story. I'm psyched that your friend's wife was such a good cook that helped the cause.
Yeah, that definitely helps the cause.
Yeah. So along the way, here's a question for you, and this is just me being naive about what it's like to go through recovery, but do you feel like, and over the last 20 years, has it felt to you like this is a new struggle every day, or after a certain amount of time, do you feel like I beat this thing? How do you think about that?
That's a great question, Greg. And in a way, it is, it's constantly changing, but not necessarily a struggle, I would say. So in the beginning, probably the first year of my sobriety, everything was a struggle. Everything. Because my life was designed around alcohol. There was always alcohol. Whatever I was doing, there was alcohol.
Yeah.
And
And I'm sure your social circle was constructed around alcohol. All your places that you probably were visiting on a regular basis was alcohol was involved, right? So it's like you almost need to change your environment to change this habit.
yeah, that's exactly right. The people that I hung around with, the things that I did, the places that I went, my daily routine, morning or evening, whatever it was, it was it had been established, and the common denominator there was alcohol. So for a period of time, that all has to be untangled. You know, what do I do when I come home from work now? What's my routine going to be? What is when I go out to dinner with friends, when I go home to see my family, when Christmas comes around, when New Year's comes around, what do I do? These are all new experiences. So I needed to. So in the beginning, the struggle was working my way around the calendar year without alcohol showing up for me at any one of these events. You know, working my way around the weekend without alcohol being a part of my routine, working my way through my daily life without it. So it was a huge struggle in that way. Once I got through the first year, I felt like, okay, so I know that there is not a date on the calendar that's going to cause me to drink. I know that. After that, there were
And
some.
that can be tough for people, right? Like especially, lapping dates on calendars, like when a parent passed away and stuff like that. Like people really circle those days on the calendar and almost like dread those days. So that's really interesting to hear that getting through that first year helped.
Exactly, that's right. Getting through that first year helped for exactly that reason. I built some confidence from doing that, from getting through those situations without the need to pick up. And then, but I was really vigilant, and I stuck with a very strict program, and I stayed very close to my sober friends, and I did a lot of service work. I used to sponsor guys that were incarcerated, and that was a huge help for me because seeing the destruction that their alcoholism has caused on their families is an important reminder for me. And anytime I show up at the jail and they let me in the locked doors, and then I spend some time and they let me back out. It's an excellent reminder of the devastation that our families go through from our behavior like that. So, or our disease, I should say. So I stayed very close to that in that way for the next 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, and then there was a death in my family at the 10-year mark. My sister passed away at my 10-year mark. And I survived that without picking up a drink. That was devastating to me and to my family, obviously. And I didn't have to pick up a drink over it, and I'm from a big Italian family, and there's always, celebrations, weddings and funerals. There's a lot of alcohol around. And I realized at that point, after 10 years, and after that event in my life, that if I didn't have to pick up for that, there's no reason that I would ever have to pick up. And since then, my nephew passed away and my father passed away, and I've approached it the same way. I mean, I felt all of my feelings, every single feeling that came down the pike in the past 20 years, good, bad, or indifferent. I had to experience them. So, before I got sober, I drank over a bad day at work. I drank over a good day at work. I drank over plenty of bad things, plenty of things that I thought were bad and that I needed to escape those feelings for. And the truth is, I didn't need to escape those feelings, or today I don't need to escape them anyway. But yeah, that was a good question.
Were there any days over that 20-year span where you were really close to drinking? I don't know if it was the ones you've already mentioned, but did you have any really close calls, days where you really felt like you just hung on by a thread?
No, not really. There was a time. Well, yeah. Let me take that back. In the first year, yes, there were some times. So I was a few months into my sobriety, and so in the beginning of when I stopped drinking, really all I wanted was to stop vomiting. I vomited every day for a period of time.
Wow.
And I just didn't want to be sick anymore. And so after the first week was a struggle for me. I didn't go to any facility to detox. I did that on my own, which I don't necessarily recommend, but that's just the path that I took. After that first week, I started feeling great because I wasn't physically ill. And, 2 weeks, a month, I was feeling really, really good. But what happened was 2 months down the road, or a period of time down the road, I took a look at the chaos that I had created in my life with my family, with my finances, with my job, with my health. I started to see the damage that I had created, and it just scared me to face it, and I didn't really know how to deal with that. So I asked my friend John for some help, and he recommended that John asked me if I believed in God, and I told him that I really didn't have a connection with God anymore. And he told me that he believed, and his way of approaching issues like the one that I described was to hand it over and trust that God will take care of it. And if I didn't have a belief in God, just believe that he believed. And that would be okay for now. So he recommended that I go home and I get on my knees and I humbly ask God to remove, to watch over me and to remove the obsession to drink. And that's what I did. And so I got home, and I lived in a basement apartment at the time, and I went into a room that had no windows. For some reason, I couldn't take a chance that somebody would see me. I don't know what I was thinking, that, I was so self-conscious about the whole situation. But I went into this room with no windows, got down on my knees, and I said, I don't know if there's anybody or anything that can hear me, but I need some help. I need some relief, and please help me stay sober for another day. And then, and literally, it took me a minute. And then I carried on with my day, and I started doing that regularly, and I started to get relief. So, so to answer your question, whether or not there were times that I was worried I was going to pick up a drink, there were a couple times, and that was the solution that I had. For many, many years, I have not had the urge to drink for many years because I'm very clear about where that will take me. Very, very clear. And whatever I'm dealing with now is not an issue compared to the issues I would create if I picked up a drink.
Yeah. That's really powerful. I think that the concept of sort of almost like surrendering yourself to something bigger than you, and whether or not you are someone who believes in God or somebody who believes in, just something, some bigger force in the universe or something, but just realizing how small and vulnerable we are, in some ways, it seems can almost have the reverse effect and in some ways like give you power or some relief or some kind of help that you needed, and help to clear the path for you in terms of what you needed. So I appreciate you sharing that with me. You're making me tear up a little bit with that one, Louie. Well, listen, I want to get into talking about fitness and everything because you've done some incredible stuff there. But let me just close out this portion of the conversation. I want to make sure to do service to anybody who is struggling, who might find this podcast and who might listen to it themselves. And I think hearing your story is really encouraging for someone going through that. But I just want to ask you explicitly, to somebody out there who might be struggling with alcohol or drugs or some other addiction, where would you recommend they start? Like, what is a first step that they could take on that road to recovery? What would you recommend there?
Well, I get this question often in my DMs on Twitter, and I can only recommend what I know and what worked for me. So that recommendation is that that people go to a 12-step meeting, an AA meeting, an NA meeting, and ask for help. There's plenty of experience inside of that meeting. There are plenty of people that can help us when we walk through those doors. Often I will recommend that to people and they'll push back on me because that is definitely not the easier, softer way. Walking into an AA meeting, introducing yourself for the first time to people, being the new person is very, very intimidating. It's very intimidating to anybody that has to do it or that does it. But it works. It works if you're as desperate as I was. That's a system that works. Yeah. I had to take some suggestions when I went there. Nobody likes to be told what to do, but I didn't know. I didn't know what to do. So if I continued to try to control my drinking or to try to figure out my problem with my head that was already screwed up, I wouldn't be able to get there. So that's my recommendation to a lot of people, is to find an AA meeting and to walk in the door and just ask for help, follow some suggestions, and there's a whole new world out there if people are willing to do the work. The problem is there's not an easy way to do it. There's no solution that says that I know of anyway that says here, just read this book and you'll be fine. Here, just do this exercise and you'll be fine. Here, take this pill and you'll be fine. This is a complete life change that needs to happen. So that's the starting point as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's great advice from somebody who's gone through it and has a really great perspective on it. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Thank you.
All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about fitness. So comment on this however you want, but I recently read on Twitter that you wake up at 3:15 a.m. in the morning. First of all, I want to know if that's true. But let's get talking about fitness. And so I want to hear about how you found your way into fitness and all the stuff you're doing now in terms of ultra marathons and all that kind of stuff. But let's start with, well, start wherever you want with that. That's what I'm hoping to learn about.
All right, cool. So the 3:15 a.m. is true, but only on the weekdays. And on the weekends.
That, first of all, that makes me tired just to think about it. But I also have 3 little kids running around here, so carry on.
Yeah, our lifestyles at this point are a little bit different, Greg, because if I had three little ones running around, I couldn't design my day the way I wanted. They would be the ones designing my day.
Yeah,
so.
That's true. Yep.
Yeah, so I understand where you're coming from. But I get out of bed at 3:15, 3:20 at the latest every weekday morning, and the reason for that is because I have this morning routine that I just love, and it's my favorite time of the day. And I have to be in work I'm supposed to be in work at 6:45. I get there often by 7, but between 3:15 and 7 a.m. I have a routine that includes having some quiet time with my coffee, water, breath work, a little bit of meditation in the morning. I do some journaling or some writing. Sometimes I try to do some journaling, but sometimes that writing just turns into some ideas for tweets. Sometimes it's a little bit more extensive than that. And then I get on to my training, whatever my workout is, and shower, and then off to work. So I need this period of time to be able to do that. And by the way, I go to bed at 7:15 every night. Unless I have an evening workout, then sometimes it's a little later.
I'm kind of jealous about the 7:15. I'm not jealous about the 3:15 though. But okay, so that's quite a routine. So that's obviously a lot of stuff you're going through. So it'd be interesting to hear a little more about that and some of the specifics. On the writing side, that's really interesting. I have taken inspiration from some folks like Dickie Bush, who was a podcast guest recently, and others around the power of writing every day. And so one of my goals in 2023 is to write for 30 minutes every day. And so it sounds like it's actually a little bit similar to you in terms of how that's actually starting to manifest. Like some days I will sit down and I will have a lot on my mind, and I'll just be like, I'll just brain dump. Here's all the stuff I'm stressed about right now, and just get it out of my brain, right, onto a piece of paper. That's one way. Another way is like, I'm like, I got 5 tweet ideas in my head or a thread idea in my head or something like that, and I just get that down on paper. But like the discipline for me is just to do the 30 minutes. So what are you thinking with the writing? What are you trying to accomplish there?
Well, I have a few different things that I'm working on with writing. I started writing my story into a book, and
cool.
Yeah, and it is pretty cool. But I was really enjoying it last year. I would sit down and on a Saturday or Sunday, and I could sit there for an hour and a half, and just put information down on the paper, like parts of my story from my past, and it was really, I really had a fun time with it. And then it started growing, and now I have all these like literally pen to paper is the way I write. So wow. I have all these papers that or notebooks that I'm trying to organize. I'm trying to take it to the next step. So there's that, and I also have a journal, and I like to write daily in my journal, but I'm not as disciplined with that, and I really want to be more disciplined. I would love to have like a hard start time, a half hour to write. I should probably try to add that into my morning routine. But my writing sometimes gets kind of overlapped by my breath work and then my training. So if I have this block of time, my breath work may go a little bit long, and then my training may start a little bit early. So I may cut out the some of my writing. I'm pretty sure I just need to start waking up earlier, I guess.
I don't know about that. There's not a whole lot earlier you can get up. Okay, what about the breath work though? That's so I don't do anything that you could really call breath work. I try to do a little bit of meditation here and there. I'm pretty bad about sticking to that routine. I just interviewed Dennis Martin, who is a Peloton instructor, and he was getting into breath work a little bit with me. He was telling me about a book he recently read called, I think it's called Breathe, maybe. It had a real impact on him. But what are you doing there, and where did you learn about that?
Yeah, I read that same book, Breathe. I think Nestor, if I'm not mistaken, is the author.
Okay,
I think.
That sounds right.
So I read that same book, and I'm interested in breath work for a number of reasons. One is because I'm an athlete, and breathing is pretty important to endurance sports. So that's one thing. The second reason is because of the calm that it brings me. A couple years ago, I had a very stressful time in my work life, that's no longer the case at work. But 2 years ago, it was very, very stressful. I mean, we all know what was going on in the country, and the struggles that we as employees had, and so anyway, I started doing breath work a couple years ago, just to promote some calm in my life. I did it in the morning before work, and I did it in the evening after work. And I started feeling like I was sleeping better from doing it. And then I got into some nasal breathing while I was sleeping, and I learned to breathe through my nose while I'm sleeping, which is very, very important, because breathing through your nose, nasal breathing promotes the parasympathetic side of the autonomic nervous system. I don't know if I'm saying this right, but
Sounds right to me.
Stimulates it anyway. And and my speech is great.
Basically, the calming part of your nervous system.
Yes, exactly. That's what I'm getting at. So so I started working there with my breath, but my morning breath routine either I do some box breathing, so 4 on the inhale, the count of 4 on the inhale, hold of 4, count of 4 on the exhale, hold of 4, and repeat. And I have
is that in through the nose and out through the mouth?
If I'm doing that type of breathing, a lot of times I do in through the nose and out through the nose.
Okay.
It's not like an intense Wim Hof type of breathing. Mm-hmm. So I do it very easily. And I'm also hooked to a chest strap heart rate monitor and linked to an app. And so I can see what my HRV is and my heart rate at the same time.
Which app are you using for that?
It's called Elite HRV, I think.
Oh yeah. Yep.
So I either do that type of breath work, or I do some Wim Hof. I've been getting back into the Wim Hof breath work. I really like it. It's a little bit more intense in the morning, but I really feel good from doing it. So so those are the types of breath work that I get into. But every day I do some type of breath work.
That's cool. And so was it that book Breathe that got you into it, or were you following somebody else? Or I'm just wondering if there's like a resource I can point people to, including myself, because I want to learn more about this.
Yeah, the book Breathe is I think really started it for me. There's some great information in that book.
Okay, cool. I'm going to check that out. Because you're like the third person I've talked to who has been talking about this. And one person I was talking to, I think it might have been Dickie Bush, was saying he struggled with meditation, but he found that breath work was really helpful, and he noticed some real benefits in his HRV and other metrics. So it sounds like there's really something to it. So I'd like to personally learn more about it.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with Dickie on that one. I think that the breath work has helped my meditation also. I couldn't just sit quietly until I started, listening to my breath, and then all of a sudden I would calm a little bit. So I'm in agreement with Dickie on that.
Cool. Okay, so let's talk about the training. So I might back up just a little bit, and it'd be interesting to hear when you really got serious about fitness and endurance sports, and then how you started down that path. Because I'm also interested for myself. I've been sort of just experimenting recently with some Zone 2 training. I kind of have recently realized that I've probably been doing cardio wrong for the last 20 plus years of my life, and not ever really building a solid aerobic base. And so now I'm really focused on kind of over the next year, really trying to get a lot of good long runs and long cycling sessions in at a lower heart rate. But how did you get into all of this? And then let's talk about where you're taking it, because it sounds to me like you're doing some pretty impressive stuff, especially for 58 years old.
Yeah, thank you. So, many of us make that mistake, Greg, with pushing too hard and being outside of our aerobic space while we're trying to build an aerobic base, kind of. So, my coach, Ryan Dreyer, had to slow me down on that one, too. I had been running for a long time, and he kind of did a hard reset with me. So, so don't feel bad about that. That's part of our... That's part of our learning. So my training started before I got sober. I had always wanted to be an athlete, probably because my mother was a marathon runner in the 70s, and my father was a competitive cyclist back then also. So we would go to races together, and big races, New York City Marathon, Boston Marathon, and some bicycling races around our area. So I kind of grew up in that environment. My main focus as I was growing up was always the party or the alcohol. So I was never able to establish myself very well as an athlete back then. But it was in my blood, and literally and figuratively, it was in my blood. And before I got sober, probably 5 years before I got sober, a friend of mine opened a karate dojo, and he asked me if I wanted to join, and I was one of the first students there. So I trained kind of sporadically. I had a fairly consistent run there because he was such a close friend that we had, he would help me get there, I guess, 3 years before I got sober. And so I probably trained 2 to 3 times a week back then. And I became the senior student there. And I learned some discipline. So when I started training, I remember this battle in my head. Should I go tonight? Shouldn't I go tonight? I just got out of work. I have other things I'd rather do. Maybe I just drink. Maybe, this battle that goes on that to make a stupid decision about, am I going to train tonight or not? Here's this half hour, or I'm going back and forth an hour, and who knows how it's going to end up if I'm battling with myself. Sometimes I go, sometimes I don't go. So anyway, I had that type of training going on before I got sober. Like I said, I was the senior student at the dojo. There were 8 of us that were rank of EQ, which is one promotion away from first degree black belt. And I was the senior student, so I was at the front of the line. this is kind of, I'll show you where this comes into my story. So I continued to train as long as I could, but the last 6 months to a year, I couldn't even show up. So I, as I was getting more and more sick, I did less and less physical activity, and to the point where I just stopped training altogether. Probably 6 months before I got sober, 9 months before I got sober, I didn't train at all. So after I got sober, I knew that I needed to live a healthier lifestyle and all around healthier lifestyle, and I needed some type of training. So I went back to the dojo and started training again, but I was no longer the senior student because that group of 7 that was left in that line tested for black belt while I was gone. So now, with a nice serving of humble pie, I moved myself down the line 7 or 8 spots, whatever it was, and I was still at rank EQ, and there were 7 new black belts on the deck. So that was a very good experience for me because it kind of right-sized me at the time. Look, I'm coming into this new place in my life, and I don't get to start in the front of the line. I got some dues to pay. And it also motivated me to train hard. So I started training more regularly when in the beginning of my sobriety. I started training 4 days a week, easily 4 days a week. And
would you say that you channeled? Did you channel your energy or even just your free time that you would have been using drinking into fitness? So was this like replacing a really bad habit with a healthy habit, or is that too simplistic of a way to think about it?
No, that's a reasonable way to think about it. Yes. So I had time and I had energy and I felt the need to focus on my health and my fitness. So it fell right into place for me. And I didn't have the distraction of drinking anymore. And but I still had that voice in my head that said, after a long day's work, do I want to go to the dojo and train, or before a long day's work at that time? I'm not sure if I was working third shift at the time still, but I still had that voice in my head, and I was conscious of this voice, and I thought to myself, I need to get rid of this voice somehow. If I'm going to really be successful, this voice cannot be I can't be questioned by this voice anymore. So over a period of time, I was able to silence it, and my training continued to become more and more consistent, and I would just show up without thought. And eventually that voice was completely gone. And I trained more consistently than anybody and everybody in the dojo. And after a period of 10 years, I reached the rank of 4th Dan, 4th degree black belt. I was the first student to reach the rank of 4th Dan. So I reclaimed that spot of senior student over the period of about a decade. So and it was something that I really wanted for me. I felt like it would make me, it could erase some of the loss that I created if I can climb myself back to that spot. So at the dojo, I learned consistency, dedication, commitment. And I haven't trained at the dojo. I stopped training at the dojo when I became an endurance athlete. And that was about 11 years ago. But everything that I learned there transferred to this life that I have now, and that's where my discipline comes from. I never question my training. 4 days a week, my coach has me currently training twice a day for 4 of my days, and I don't even question it. I come home, I train in the morning, work a 10-hour day, come home and just start changing into my workout clothes. Mm-hmm. So, that was the karate dojo was the beginning, and it was a really good foundation for me.
So I have this philosophy that relying on willpower is kind of a tough game to play, and it's much better to basically set up your systems and environment so that you can almost be on autopilot. And the more of those daily decisions that you can remove from the equation, the greater chance of success that you have. So I've implemented this system recently on every Sunday. So we're recording this today on a Sunday. So a couple hours ago, I just did this, where every Sunday I spend about a half hour and I go through the upcoming week and I say, okay, I want to do 3 zone 2 workouts. I want to do a HIIT workout. I want to do a couple of strength workouts. I need one day where I'm going to mainly rest and do some stretching and stuff like that. That's kind of my week. So on Sundays, I'm putting that all in the calendar. And of course, as we already mentioned, I got 3 little kids. I've got full-time job, lots of responsibilities. A lot of people want my time. And what I do is, set this out. So not only workouts, but I'm also putting in, when am I going to do this podcast? When am I going to edit this? What am I going to do? Right? It all gets put in. And so on Monday mornings, it's just go time. And it's not, should I work out time, or do I really have time to dedicate to the podcast today time? It's like, nope, this is planned. I just need to execute now. Would you say that you're doing something similar with it sounds like you have a coach helping you out, which sounds like a cheat code to me almost. I think I need a coach. But would you agree with that philosophy, I guess?
Absolutely. That's right on. Autopilot, a lot of my life I live on autopilot because I need to go from one part of my system to the next. That's what I do for my health, my nutrition. Like Sundays for me, I'm on autopilot. Also, I do meal prep for a couple hours, and then I don't think, well, what should I make? Should I worry about my lunches this week? No, the Sunday is meal prep day. Autopilot is something that a martial artist is very, very familiar with because if you that's the way we train our bodies. So if you go to throw a punch at the nose of somebody who's been training in karate for a decade or 2, the natural reaction is to block it, and there's no thought. It's all autopilot. So I don't think it's healthy for people to for the average person just to walk around on autopilot and not make any considerations of how they're living their lives, because that also happens. But for somebody who has a system set up like you do and like I do, it's very helpful. Ryan, my coach Ryan, who by the way would be happy to help you out if that's what you were looking for. He sets my plan a week in advance, and I check it out and I see what I have going on there, and I just follow along. Pretty simple.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. I sort of have become a real creature of habit and routine. And I think there's this idea that, you're like a slave to the system or whatever if you adhere really closely to a routine. I actually have come to believe it's the opposite. So when I don't have a structure in place, I find that I can sort of go whichever way the wind blows. And so this happens, I get tied up in this, and now that takes over my whole day. And, go down this path and get involved with this, and then all of a sudden I didn't get to do all the stuff that was important to me. So I kind of like the idea of it's, I don't know, this is a little cheesy, but it's like living a little bit more intentionally and being like, okay, here's the things that are important to me. Like, I want to get to the end of this week and have accomplished this, and this. A lot of other stuff's going to happen. There's going to be a lot of fire drills. I already know that. But like, these are, to me, are the non-negotiables. And so, yeah, that's so far it's working okay for me. But I feel pretty good about that. At the end of the week, I'm like, yeah. And I feel actually less stressed having a system like that. Like on Sundays, I'm like, oh my God, I have all this stuff coming up. But then once I get it in a calendar, I'm like, okay, like that's out of my brain now and on paper. And now it's like execute time. And I feel much better about it.
Yeah. I think our lives in that way are very similar. Yeah. Works for me too.
Yeah. Okay. So on the endurance training and, so tell me just a little bit more about what that's like. So, how, maybe what that looks like for you today. I've mentioned a couple of times that you're doing some, really impressive stuff in terms of, ultra marathons and stuff like that. But what does that look like for you today? And how is it being a 58-year-old accomplishing all these really cool athletic feats?
So I started running because I was sparring with some young guys, and and I thought that if I could control my breathing and my wind, and my cardio was better, that I would be able to hang in there a little bit longer, and I would find advantage there. So while I was training in the martial arts, I decided that I would start running, and eventually, and I had this hate relationship with running. Just hated it. There was no love there at all. It was just a grind. And I started off a mile or two, and eventually I decided to run a race, a 5K race, and I did pretty well, and I really liked it. And then I thought to myself, what if I could run a half marathon someday? So I started looking into that type of training, and you know what? We've kind of established that I'm a more is better type guy. That's kind of the roots of my my addiction are right there. So I continued to add, and once I ran the half marathon, I set a goal for a marathon, and then I stopped training at the dojo because I was waking up early, working a long day, and I had to travel a long distance to get down there. And so even though the class was only an hour and a half long, it was another hour and a half time commitment for travel. So it's a 3-hour block for me, and I can train now in an hour. I can get a good run in just literally right out my front door. Mm-hmm. So I started leaning more heavily on the endurance sports, and resigned at my dojo, and then I started getting into some obstacle course racing, which is just so fun. Running around like a kid, splashing around in the mud. I mean, how much? That's it's heaven for a. I was a 50-year-old guy at the time, and then I ran a number of marathons and decided that I wanted to stretch that out to a 50-mile ultra marathon. So I had a 50-miler on the books about 2 years ago, and I had been training for it pretty hard. And I ran into a physical issue with my leg or my foot that just would not heal for me, like a muscular issue that I was having, or a tendon or something. And that's when I sent a DM to Ryan, my coach, and I said, I introduced myself, and I told him what I was training for, and he had a couple ultra marathons under his belt. And I asked him if he could help me, and he completely redesigned my training. So I was running, and I was just logging miles, and had no good recovery program designed. Like I didn't follow much of a recovery program, and maybe in our 20s or 30s we can get away with that, but I was not able to get away with that in my 50s. So Ryan completely changed my nutritional plan, my recovery, and my.
So what were some of those big changes look like? I'm curious both on the nutrition and the actual like training. What were some of those big changes that he implemented?
So nutritionally, we went with a heavier protein diet. That was the first change that we made. I was running on carbs, a lot of carbs, and not even good carbs. So we made that change. Also, my fluid intake, as far as nutritional goes, my electrolyte replacement, he reset for me. We came up with some good plans for that, which are important when I'm stressing my body that much.
So do you actually take an electrolyte supplement, or are you getting that some other way?
I take magnesium daily, and I get my sodium, potassium through an electrolyte replacement like Element or one of those. Yep. One of those that I add.
Is that how you pronounce it? The LMNT?
Yeah, LMNT. Yeah.
Okay. I those guys actually just sent me a box of their salts to try out. So yeah. I've been trying them the last couple of days.
Yeah, I love it. Man.
Actually, it tastes pretty good.
Yeah, it's a great product. It's got I think 1,000 milligrams of sodium and some other electrolytes in there. It's a great product. I like it.
Now, do you take that before a run or after, or how do you time that?
Normally after a run.
Yeah.
To replace them. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Got it.
So
more heavier protein,
yep.
Some electrolytes. What about the training regimen? So what does like a typical week look like? And I'm sure it differs depending on the season and when you're training for a race and stuff like that, but give me like a sense of what maybe like a 7-day week could look like.
Yeah. So when before I called Ryan, I was running probably 6 days a week. And like you and I talked about earlier, I was there was no different heart rate zones. It was just all the same thing. I would run as hard as I could any given day for as far as I could. Well, I had a distance planned, but I would keep up the pace as much as I could for that specific distance. But I would only run. That was all my training was running. So he said, whoa, time out. You got the running down. We understand that. We need to recover from the running now. So Ryan put some mobility work in there for me. He put some yoga in there for me, some different types of strength training. And the running. And that's where we were until I ran that 50-mile ultra. We kind of stuck with a program like that. So we backed off my weekly running distances, but we still kept a long run in there on the weekend. And we added quite a bit of yoga and some stretching and that type of recovery to it. So and cool. that was just until we got through that 50-miler, and then we redesigned the program again and again and again.
Wow, cool. Is there any? Are there any like hit days in there? So do you do like any high intensity stuff as part of the training?
Yeah, just I think it was Friday evening. I had a run with 6 30-second intervals in it. And he also has some he's got some threshold runs in there for me, which are 20 minutes apiece, so it might be an hour and a half run with a couple 20-minute thresholds in there. So we're kind of in the off season now. The last event that I did was a full Ironman Triathlon in November, and I was kind of cooked at that point. I was kind of burnt out from all the training that I did. And so we lightened up quite a bit until we got into, and it was kind of honestly a free for all for that month and a half until we reached the new year. Ryan set the training for me during that period of time, but I did some of it and I changed some of it, and I needed to have some fun with it. And he told me just to go out and enjoy it and change it up as much as I could. But when we got to the new year, we started with about a 7 to 8 hour a week training program, and that includes now I'm a triathlete, so I'm not just running. And my training.
By the way, congratulations on that, because just hearing that come out of your mouth at 58 years old and having it be a new thing for you, that's pretty cool. And it gives inspiration for people like me who are, in their early 40s and saying, all right, this guy's achieving some pretty awesome stuff, 14, 15 years in the future. So congrats on that.
Yeah, thank you, man. So what Ryan and I ended up doing was we did the 50 miler about a year and a half ago, and then I trained with him throughout the rest of the year, and we set some goals to PR as many of my distances as possible, and I was able to PR. I had a personal best in the 5K that year, personal best in the half marathon, and the fastest marathon I had run in years, all in the year of 2021, under Ryan's guidance. So after that, I was training for a 100-mile ultra marathon, which was last June. That was the next thing we put on the calendar, and a bunch of guys were going to do Panama City Ironman, and I jumped on board that one. So Ryan got me up to speed. I had done a little bit of triathlon before years ago, but I was never much of a swimmer, and I never really trained the bike. I didn't know how to train it. So Ryan added all that for me, and so now the month of January, what I'm doing for training is running 4 days a week, bike 2 days a week, swim 2 days a week, and some strength training 2 days a week. But that's all on my weekly calendar. But they're short trainings, a lot of them. So when we get closer to any event, we'll start to stretch them out. Right now we're at about 7 to 8 hours a week of training, and we'll double that at some point throughout the year.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, I was going to say, like, 7 to 8 hours a week sounds like reasonable. Like, it sounds manageable. Like, I'm probably doing somewhere close to that.
Yeah.
Maybe not quite. Okay, cool. So, well, awesome stuff, man. By the way, have you ever read Rich Roll's book? I think it's like Ultraman.
Running Ultra?
Running Ultra, yeah.
I love Rich Roll. He's great.
Awesome. He's awesome. Your story reminds me of a little bit of his, in that he struggled with alcoholism, and I think at 40 had like a come to Jesus moment and turned his life around, and obviously has done some really pretty impressive stuff with his life since then. So I love stories like yours. Just shows people what's possible.
Thank you.
Well, I'll tell you what, actually, in terms of what's possible, let's say you're somebody listening to this right now, you're in your 40s, 50s, and you're kind of like, I'm not really in great shape. I probably drink a little bit too much. These guys are talking about ultra marathons and training, hours and hours and hours and doing all this crazy stuff. Like, that's not realistic for me. Like, same question for you, I guess, around, giving advice to somebody who's trying to conquer an alcohol addiction. Like, what would be the first step that you would take for someone in that situation?
So, if somebody came to me and wanted to make some life changes to increase their health, I think we would probably start with whatever habit was most devastating at the time. So what I mean by that is, if somebody is drinking 5-6 days a week and has no exercise routine, and their nutrition is can be improved quite a bit, we would probably start with the drinking, because it's useless really to get into much of an exercise routine unless we're going to put the first one in check. So, that does, it's very individualized because it depends how much effect that drinking is having on this person. But anyway, I would start with the thing that's most devastating, and then let's get that one in check. Let's figure that one out. Let's back off of the alcohol, whatever it is. Get it down to a couple days a week, or completely stop, whatever is necessary. And then we'll start with the fitness program. And most fitness programs, my recommendation would be walking. I think walking is a great segue into fitness, and it's a great way to increase fitness. It's a great segue into running. And then as far as nutrition goes, many of us can make improvements in that area, and just eating whole foods, real food is a good place to start. A lot of people drink calories, and I think that's another helpful avenue to upgrade somebody's nutrition, is to just cut out the sugary drinks and back to the water and black coffee.
Yeah. I love those tips. I think that's you got to get the basics right before you get advanced. And I think that, it's funny on the alcohol front. Like, I think there's a lot of people who, consume alcohol and say, maybe wouldn't say they have an alcohol problem, but I think one thing that I have kind of realized the last probably year or so, probably with the help of Andrew Huberman and the great episode he did on alcohol, is that a relatively limited amount of alcohol can have a lot of downstream impacts. So like, I think about myself, like I wouldn't consider myself, so I think I might have mentioned to you, like, I've been alcohol free for maybe 150, 170 days or something like that.
Congratulations. That's great.
Oh, thank you. I mean, it's interesting because, I think a lot of people are waking up to this and saying, okay, I'm not somebody, I didn't have the same type of struggle that someone like you faced, right? And it was just more a social drinker and stuff like that. But if I really took a look at it and be like, okay, yeah, there was a lot of weekend mornings where, I don't know, was I hungover, or I was probably, not in a great mood and kind of grumpy with my kids, and I wasn't working out. And like, I just feel like there's all these habits that, well, let me put it this way. If you make one positive change like that, then the other positive changes kind of have the space to start stacking up. Alcohol is such an obvious one, right? Because it can crush your energy and your mood, and it can have you, making bad decisions with your nutrition and this and that. And so that's an obvious one. But, on that front, I'm curious that, the kind of quitting alcohol has almost become like fashionable these days. And, everybody's doing dry January, and you're seeing, actually I interviewed the CEO of Athletic Brewing Company, which is the biggest non-alcoholic brewer in the US. I'm personally actually really enjoying those beverages. Like, they're interesting. They've been a nice way for me to stop consuming alcohol, but to keep socializing and stuff. But I'm curious, kind of what's your take on that? Because that is almost like I don't know if it's a different reason to quit alcohol. It's almost like on a different scale. And the purpose is more focused on fitness and productivity and overall health. But I wonder, someone in your shoes, somebody who's legitimately been through a really hard struggle with alcohol, what's your take on that whole movement?
So we're talking about improvement, and we've had conversations about nutrition, we've had conversations about breath work, we've had conversations about training, we've had conversations about addiction, and they're all about improvement, about us improving and becoming our best self, so we can be we can be available to our families, to our children. We can live a long, healthy, happy life, and we can model that behavior for our families. So I think that when we start to make steps forward in one area or the next, we look for low-hanging fruit in all of the other areas. I mean, so you want your athletic performance to increase like I do, and I didn't really know how to get there. And Ryan said, "Well, let's work on your nutrition because that will help your athletic performance. Let's work on your recovery, your sleep, your stress level. Let's work on all of them." So I think that if we can back up a couple questions, when you asked me about this 40-year-old person, 50-year-old person that wants to increase their health, we start on the big ones, but eventually, if that person has cut back on his alcohol consumption, he has started walking, he has cut out the Dunkin', whatever that drink is that was his favorite sugary, frothy drink on the way to work.
I can tell you're a Massachusetts guy dropping that Dunkin'.
Right, exactly. So he got a little bit of forward momentum. Now he's going to look for other ways to make improvements, and that may be where the movement for less alcohol comes into play. Plus, the problem around addiction is very, very obvious now, and some people don't want to get into that game, and I understand why. I mean, any Saturday that you were to wake up hungover is some wasted time with the family, and it's some wasted energy that could have gone towards your goals, not necessarily you specifically, but other people. So, so that's part of the answer, and the other part on the non-alcoholic beer, I think that if that's what gets you there, that's a great option for somebody if they can replace beer with alcohol. With no alcohol. I don't choose to do that. I've never chosen to do that. Because it just maybe psychologically brings me too close to the demon. I'm not sure why it is, but it's just not one that I choose to go to. My party drink is seltzer with a little bit of lime.
Yeah. That doesn't surprise me. I would imagine that that drinking a non-alcoholic beer might be tougher for somebody who's had a real struggle. So. But yeah, I mean, I personally have found it to be great, and in a way to it's good for continuing to socialize. And it's interesting. It's become like much more socially acceptable. But like even like 6 or 8 months ago, I was cracking open these things at parties, and everybody was like, "What are you drinking?" And now I was at a friend's house last night, and there was 3 of us all drinking non-alcoholic beer. I'm like,
that's
okay,
cool.
Yeah. I'm like, I think I am like,
yeah.
I don't know if it's me like making all my friends having this effect on them or whatever. But I was like, hey, you're drinking a Guinness Zero, and hey, you're drinking an Athletic, and not coincidentally, these are the same friends I'm also texting with about like, hey, heart zone this and zone 2 training this and all this stuff, because
exactly
people are taking it a little more seriously.
Exactly.
So, yeah, cool. Well, listen, we've been going for a while, and I want to be respectful of your time. I've learned a lot from you. I learn a lot from you every day, and like I love following you on Twitter.
Thank you.
You just drop so much great stuff, and it's inspirational, but it's also like practical and tactical, and So I highly recommend anybody listening to this to go over and follow Louie on Twitter. But let me just finish up and ask you my standard closing question. It's kind of a hefty one, and you've already dropped a lot of knowledge on me. But if there's one thing you think you've figured out in life so far that maybe others haven't yet figured out, be curious, what that one thing would be.
Well, I'm right now I'm kind of stuck on this mindset that comfort comes at a cost. So I guess by nature, humans constantly seek comfort. And maybe that was necessary generations ago to keep us thriving. But now there's so much comfort in our world that it can be detrimental to always seek comfort. And my recommendation for people is that they go outside of their comfort zone on a regular basis and do things that are difficult, do things that are hard, do things that are uncomfortable, whatever those things are, and continue to do them. And my avenue right now is physical. I'm often outside of my physical comfort zone, but I try to do that also in my relationships and in my work career and other parts of my life. So my advice to anyone who's looking for growth in their life is to get outside of your comfort zone.
I like that. I like that a lot. That reminds me of a quote, I think, from Jerzy Gregorick. You may have heard it. It's what is it? Easy choices, hard life. Hard choices, easy life.
Yeah, love it.
Yeah. So it sounds like you've been doing a good job making the hard choices throughout your life, and you had to make some hard choices to walk into an AA meeting. You got to make a hard choice. Well, maybe you don't have to make this choice. You already made this hard choice that you're getting out of bed at 3:15 a.m. in the morning.
That's easy now, Greg. It's gotten easy.
Yeah. Good for you. Good for you. But yeah, you've done a nice job kind of personifying that whole idea. And God, man, it is cool to watch you go. And I love hearing you say, I'm setting new personal bests on marathons and this and that at age 58. It's like, that's cool stuff, man. So
thanks, man. Thank you.
Yeah. Way to go. Way to go. Thank you for showing the rest of us what's possible. Like, it's really cool. Like I can't wait to share this episode with all my friends and be like, all right, you lazy dudes, come on, let's get it together.
Oh, man. That's great. Yeah. It's so cool to see you putting messages out. I mean, I know just by speaking with you that we run similar. We live similar lifestyles. So it's so cool to see that you're putting that out to the world and spreading the message. It's important.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. No, I love talking to people like you and who've got great messages to share. And I love just learning from people like you, so I can try to implement this in my own life, which is a lot of fun. All right. Well, what's next for you, Louie, and where can people find you? Because I'm sure they're all going to want to find you after this.
So I'm setting my calendar up right now for this next year, and on my race schedule, I have possibly 2 100-mile ultra marathons in the beginning of the summer. One I may back down to a 50-miler just because they're 6 weeks apart, and I need to make some responsible choices.
Yeah.
I also have a 10-mile swim on the calendar for this summer. But that is pretty close to one of these 100 milers. What happened was I put a 100-mile ultramarathon on the books, and then 8 weeks later, a 10-mile swim. And then I just found out that I will probably get into another 100-mile ultramarathon that I qualified for, and that falls in between those two races. So I have to do a little bit of shuffling, but either way, I got a big start to the summer, and then I will be finishing the summer with a couple 70.3 half Ironman triathlons and a full, again, down in Florida with some of my teammates that I'm really looking forward to. And I can be reached or followed or contacted at Twitter. My Twitter name is at Louie Ruvolo, LouieRuvolo.
That's awesome. Wow. That is some calendar you got going. You're inspiring me. Let me tell you this. I haven't run a race or anything like that. It's been 15 years since I've done anything like that competitively. So you're inspiring me. I was actually just looking at races this morning, and I think I'm just going to start in April with a 10K just to get something under my belt.
Nice.
To get back on the horse here because it's been so long. And so, but appreciate the inspiration.
Yeah, and Greg, it's great. It's so great to there's such fun events for the whole family, and it's such a positive thing. I mean, through the difficult times of my life, I never forgot those races with my mother and father, and you will make the same impression and imprint on your children by taking them to that 10K race and to some other races. So I would recommend and encourage you to do it.
Yep. That's great. That did cross my mind. Actually, I was thinking about that when I was looking at signing up. I was like, I got to bring my kids to this because just by osmosis, some of this positive energy will sink in.
Absolutely.
Cool. Well, listen, man, maybe we'll do a round 2 at some point, and we'll go even deeper on the training, and maybe I'll be a little further along in my journey and able to have a more informed conversation with you about all that then. But in the meantime, everybody go follow Louie on Twitter. We'll link to your handle in the show notes. And listen, man, this has been really awesome. I really appreciate the time today.
Yeah. Hey, thanks, Greg. And anytime, let's catch up anytime through whatever avenue it is. So I appreciate you, man. And thanks for sitting down with me.
Awesome. Thank you. There you have it, my friends. Louie Ruvolo. I told you he was an inspiring guy. I wasn't lying. Listen, head over to Twitter and go follow Louie if you're not already. It's at Louie Ruvolo. I'll also link to his handle in the show notes. I have a feeling that Louie is about to get huge on Twitter and probably other platforms as well. So get over there early and start following him. Listen, I have a few more quick things for you. Number one, just a reminder to subscribe to the Intentional Wisdom newsletter, gregcampion.substack.com. I'm going to write up more on this episode there and publish that in the next couple of days, so you don't want to miss that. Number two, this episode is the first one I've published video on Spotify for. So if you're listening or watching over there, I'd love to know if you like having the video or not. Hit me up on Twitter at Gregory Campion and let me know. And finally, just one more request to share this episode on social media, please, if you liked it. I'm working really hard to grow this podcast and to help as many people as I can. So when people like you take the time to share an episode like this on social media, it is just absolutely huge, and I really, really appreciate it. All right, my friends, thank you so much for listening and watching. I really appreciate you, and I will see you next time.